Good afternoon and welcome to this special Access to Justice program in celebration of Latinx Heritage Month. My name is Erica Bond and I'm the Vice President of Justice Programs here at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And as a proud Latina and an attorney by training, I am so thrilled that John Jay is a Hispanic serving institution and that we are working to educate our students to be fierce advocates for justice. And as part of this mission, we bring wonderful, thoughtful leaders for justice and alumni to come speak with our community about how to advance justice for all communities. And so today I am really pleased to welcome the Honorable Julio Rodriguez to John Jay. I am also really honored to facilitate a conversation that will help us learn a lot more about the judge's impressive experience and his work to ensure diverse representation in the legal field and greater representation of Latinx folks as well. I'm also really happy to be collaborating with two of our students on this program. The first student I think you can see on the screen now is Sarah Arguelles, and we also have Juliana Figueroa here as well. And so I'm now going to turn the program over to Sarah, and she's going to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, all. My name is Sarah Arguelles. I am a senior and a member of Adelante. Adelante is a leadership program at John Jay that supports Latinx students and those interested in Latinx issues. Their focus is to help students graduate on time with professional skills as well as experiences. Through this program, I was able to find my ardor for equity and advocacy work in higher education. I am so delighted and honored to introduce our keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Justice Julio Rodriguez III of the New York State Appellate Court. Justice Rodriguez is a proud member of the Latinx community and is also a John Jay College alumnus who graduated with a degree in legal studies. He went on to earn his JD at Temple University's James E. Beasley's School of Law. After earning his law degree, Justice Rodriguez worked in various roles, such as an assistant district attorney of the New York County District Attorney's Office, an administrative law judge in the New York City's Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, as well as a Bronx County Supreme Court justice, to now serving on the New York State Appellate Court. Justice Rodriguez is a member of both the Puerto Rican and Dominican Bar Associations. Their commitment to the Latinx community has been demonstrated in a variety of ways throughout his accomplished career. We are so thrilled to be hearing from him today. Thank you for joining us.
I guess I should just jump in then. First, thank you, Vice President Bond, John Jay College, and Adelante for holding this event and having me during Latinx Heritage Month. Also, thank you to Mindy Bachstein, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and the External Affairs Office for their help in putting this event together. Before I proceed, I just want to say that my heart and thoughts and prayers are with all those that are affected by Hurricane Fiona, especially those in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. As you have heard, my name is Julio Rodriguez III, and I am an Associate Justice for the Appellate Division, First Department, a state appellate court in Manhattan, which hears cases from both Bronx County and New York County, that is the Bronx and Manhattan. I've been an Associate Justice for the First Department since 2001, a little over a year now. And my career in public service, however, goes back many, many years. The picture that you see behind me is, I asked for permission to use this photograph. I wasn't sure if I could, but they said that it was fine. This is a photograph of the majestic courthouse, of the courtroom that the First Department presides in. And if you ever have an opportunity to pass by 25th Street in Madison, it is just a wonderful piece of architecture. The courtroom is majestic, it is magnificent. It is something that if you have a passion for law and the courts, that you should pay a visit to and just see firsthand. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in New York City. Specifically, I was born in Brooklyn. I am the oldest of three, and I was raised by a strong single Puerto Rican mother. I was raised in Bushwick in Brooklyn, to be exact. And the Bushwick of today, for those of you that are familiar with Bushwick, is not the Bushwick of the 1980s when I grew up there. Today, Bushwick is lined with swanky bars and restaurants and million-dollar studios. In the 1980s, Bushwick was crime-ridden. It was all too often the backdrop for crime reports and even an HBO special on the prevalent drug trade and frequent homicides. I graduated from Brooklyn Tech High School and then went on to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And let me say that since my graduation from John Jay College, this is the first time that I've been back, sadly. That's a sad fact, but I hope that that's something that will definitely change. Let me say that John Jay holds a very special place in my heart. When I got to law school, my classmates hailed from universities throughout the United States, including many Ivy League and prestigious schools. I'm proud to report that the education that I received at John Jay was second to none, and I was as prepared, if not more prepared, than my classmates in law school. After John Jay, I earned a law degree from Temple University in Philadelphia. And after experiencing growing up in the city, a career not just in law, but in public service specifically was my way of giving back. I was mentioned before, I worked at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in the Department of Investigation as an administrative law judge. And I then began my judicial career in 2013 when I was appointed to the New York City Criminal Court. After several judicial roles between 2013 and 2021, including conducting trials in the criminal and civil terms of Bronx and Manhattan, and serving as the administrative judge for criminal matters in Bronx County, I was appointed by the governor to the Appellate Division First Department in May of 2021. The Appellate Division, where I currently sit, hears intermediate appeals. That is, we hear appeals from New York State trial level courts, and we sit one level below the highest state court in New York, the Court of Appeals. We hear appeals for all types of cases: criminal, civil, family, matrimonial, you name it, we preside over it. As with my role in public service, it has been and continues to be a true privilege to serve the city and the state. One of my greatest privileges of my career so far was in December of last year. On December 9th, 2021, in my current position as Appellate Division, on the Appellate Division, I sat on the first ever all Latinx panel in the history of the Appellate Division First Department, a court that was created in 1894. That's right, you heard correctly, 1894. It took 128 years to achieve this milestone. This panel of justices, myself and four of my colleagues, Associate Justice Sally Manzanet Daniels, Lisbeth Gonzalez, and Manny Mendez, as well as the presiding justice of the court, Rolando Acosta, marked a milestone not only for our community, but also for New York State's judiciary. It marked a milestone for a number of reasons, and these are ideas that I'm sure we will return to today. But one of the most significant is that diversity is important because of the impact and credibility it brings to the system. In our diverse society, especially here in New York City and state, diversity in leadership and public institutions, it's not just a matter of an abstract concept. It's about having our institution reflect the people that they serve. So when we have an all-Latino panel in our court, or an all-woman panel in our court, which happens regularly in the First Department, or an all-African-American panel, which the Appellate Division's Second Department just had for the first time in its history on September 9th, it strengthens public trust in our institutions. I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to be part of our historic appellate panel last December and to be part of improving the quality of justice in New York every day. With all that background provided, I'd like to say again, thank you for having me for this discussion, and I hope that our conversation goes some ways towards a greater understanding and interest in the judicial system, the practice of law and public service, as well as the understanding of how far we have come and what is left to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that background and for giving us a little glimpse. I know there is so much that you've done in your long and illustrious career, but giving us a sense of who you are and where you come from, not just professionally, but also personally, is really great to hear about. And we want to talk a little bit more. We've got a bunch of questions for you. And we'd love to learn a little bit more about how your identity has actually shaped your approach to the pursuit of justice. So you told us a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to school and how that has shaped who you are. How do you think that's shaped your role on the bench and in the many other ways that you have served in a legal capacity?
You know, the identity, what is that? It's who I am, right? Like, how do I identify myself? What's my background, my experiences? And I think what my identity has done for me is that it's opened up a voice, a different aspect, a different perspective in the various jobs that I've had. I certainly think that happened when I was in the Manhattan DA's office, and I know it happens as a judge. And you'd be surprised. I could give you countless of examples of how my experiences are some things that are not understood by others that don't come from similar backgrounds or haven't experienced what I've experienced growing up in Bushwick, being a Puerto Rican male, being a minority. So I think it adds to obviously who I am and to the bodies that I'm a part of, and I think it brings a perspective that has long been lacking in the legal field, to be precise.
Feel free if there are examples that you want to give or stories that you want to share. It might help illuminate things for our students, because I think sometimes it's not that tangible, right? Like how does this really matter, on day-to-day basis? How does it change the way you do your job? How do you approach it?
Now that you say that, I'll bring one. This is one of my favorite examples when I was in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And let me take a moment now to sort of say something about being a former prosecutor, because I think in today's day and age, it's almost like taboo to say that you were a former prosecutor, right? But I say that with great pride, because I think I was a good prosecutor. And by that, I mean that too often a prosecutor is envisioned as a person that just wants to get someone convicted, right? To throw someone in jail. That was never, ever my focus. In fact, I don't know if these statistics would bear out, but I would dare say that I was probably responsible for the most, if not one of the most, declined to prosecutes in the history of the Manhattan DA's office, at least up to the time that I was there. And why was that? Because to me, justice wasn't only justice for the victims, right, of crimes. It was also doing the right thing. It was making sure that the person, the human being that we're accusing of a crime, that I could prove that case. Not only did I have to make sure that I could prove the case, but I had to believe in the defendant's guilt, right? If I didn't believe in the defendant's guilt, or if I had doubt, how can I ever pretend to convince 12 jurors, 12 ordinary citizens of a person's guilt? This has real consequences. And one of the stories that always sticks in my mind, and obviously I won't say any names to protect the innocent or not so innocent, but there was during one shift on ECAB, which is the Early Case Assessment Bureau in Manhattan, and that's what you do in that shift. It's a night shift, and this shift was a night shift. What happens is when the police officers make arrests, one of the next steps is they have to speak to an ADA, and the ADA gets the information from the police officers, and then the ADA decides what, if any, charges are going to be brought. So one night, one of the very few nights, it was a little slow that night. So I remember I was speaking with a colleague of mine, a white male colleague. And he was telling me about a case that he had in which he wasn't certain. He wasn't absolutely certain in his soul that the defendant, the person that was accused of this crime, was guilty, right? So he asked me what should I do? And I said, well, so we went over the case, we went over the facts and circumstances, what we thought he could prove. And at the end of the day, I said, listen, if you can't prove this case, dismiss it, right? Dismiss it. That's what justice requires. That's what the law requires, the way I interpret it, right? But his response wasn't that. His response instead to me was, you know what? I guess I'm just going to try it, and we'll let the jury figure it out. And I was like, why would you do that? Like, that borders on unethical, it borders on criminal. Like, why would you do that? And his response to me was, because it'll be good practice, right? It'll be good trial experience. And I said to myself, and I said to him, I wasn't ashamed to say it to him, you should be embarrassed of yourself, right? There is a human being on the other end. What about if you get a conviction, right? What happens if you get a conviction? This is not a game. This is not about your trial experience. It is not about your litigation experience. It is about justice. And justice here requires that you dismiss these charges. The irony of this is that fast forward to today, I see my colleague in the news all the time, railing on the DA's office, because now he's a high-powered defense attorney, right? And now he rails about these wrongful, unjust convictions, right? But it's a sentiment that he espoused way back then in 99, that leads these sorts of injustices, right? So that's just one of the examples on how I think that my experiences lend to the process. I have several more, and I'll try to bring some up as they become appropriate. But I thought I'd start off with that one.
Thank you. I think it's really helpful not just to understand, how identity is important and how communities being reflected in the court system is important, but also in the way that the system itself can shape your experience, right? Can also add to it in the sense that it sounds like this person that you were dealing with was also moved based on his experience. He might not have understood before, right? The negative impact that this system could have on somebody. But then after having worked in it, now he's turned around and become an advocate. So
Yeah.
I find that so interesting, right? The way that our experiences kind of shape the way we approach justice. So thank you for sharing that story with us. I'm going to ask you another question, which is just a broad question about what does this month mean to you? What does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you? Why is it important to you? And why are you here speaking with us today for this event?
It's an opportunity to celebrate and to highlight our culture, our heritage, right, our experiences. And it's a time to reflect on our collective accomplishments while understanding that the road ahead remains long and winding, right? I've always thought, I went to Philippa Schuyler, which is the IS 383 in Brooklyn. And the reason that I mentioned that is because the school had a motto, and the motto was, "To whom much is given, much is required." And I believe that I fall into that category. I've been fortunate. I've been blessed. I've worked extremely hard, and I've been rewarded for that. And I now feel that I have an obligation to sort of help my people, minorities, everyone, and anyone who wants to work hard and achieve in order to achieve, right? There were others that opened the doors and paved the way for me. And I feel that I have to make sure that those doors remain open as others try to close them for the people that are to follow.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you coming back and joining us as an alum and sharing your experiences with us and giving back to our community. I know it means a lot to our students. So I actually have a question about your role as an alum. So as you probably know, we're a Hispanic serving and a majority minority institution at John Jay. And we have lots of students here who are interested in going into various careers around public safety and the law in particular. And I'm just wondering if you can offer some insights for our students as they embark on this career journey, oftentimes in majority white fields like the law is still is today. And any insights you can share about how your education at John Jay helped to shape your passion and your interest in law and in the field of justice.
Well, my passion and interest in law, particularly criminal law, which is where the vast majority of my experience lies, it came up from my childhood in Brooklyn, my being raised in Bushwick, and the injustices, the inequities, and things of that nature that I saw. So I came into John Jay with a set goal and a set purpose of becoming a lawyer, right? Becoming a judge was like a dream that I never thought I could achieve. And yet here I am. Like I said, I've been blessed. So when I got to John Jay, I knew what I wanted to do. What I didn't know was how to do it, right? I didn't know, I wasn't, I'm the first generation graduate in my family. So obviously first attorney, first judge, a bunch of firsts. And my mother, God bless her, she did the absolute very best that she could, but she didn't graduate college, right? She didn't know anything about the LSAT. She didn't know about all the requirements and law school and all of that. So John Jay served as a vehicle to give me that information, to sort of prepare me for that and for that journey. The other thing I want to say is that in addition to my judicial responsibilities, I also teach. I teach at two colleges. And, I tell my students that if you look me up on ratemyprofessor.com, you will see that universally everyone will say the same thing about me. And that is that I am extraordinarily difficult, right? I give surprise quizzes. You're not going to pass this class unless you read, and this, that, and the other. But then they all go on to say how much they love me, right? How I am fair, how I have my students' best interest in heart, how I even had one student admit she failed, and then admit that had she done what I had told her to do, she would have passed, right? She took ownership of that. And the reason that I say this is because what I tell my students is that as minorities, no one is ever going to give us anything, right? Everything we get, we're going to have to earn. And we're going to have to work harder than most to achieve what it is that we want to achieve in life. So because of that, I think I do a disservice if I'm one of these professors that's just going to pass you for showing up. It's not going to happen. That's not what you're paying for, right? And that's not my way of giving back. If you pass Professor Rodriguez's criminal procedure and practice class, it's because you understand New York State criminal procedure and practice. It's not because you showed up to class, you turned on your computer and you passed. That's not it. But what we have to understand is that we face challenges, we're going to face obstacles, and in order to overcome them, the way that you overcome them is by having a real good tough work ethic, right? You have to be focused, you have to be determined, and you have to forge forward. And John Jay, the reason I got John Jay of when I went and now, two different animals, right? I hear that John Jay now, in terms of getting in, is exceedingly tough. It's very competitive. And that's, I think, because a lot of people have realized what I noticed back then, which is you're getting a lot of bang for your buck going to John Jay, right? And that's especially true if you seek out what I call the tougher professors, right? I remember my colleagues looking, when we were selecting courses, doing research on professors, and they wanted to take professors that, quote unquote, didn't fail people. I didn't necessarily do that, especially for my writing courses. I took professors that did fail people. I wanted to be challenged. And at the end of the day, it paid off for me. And I think it'll pay off for you as well.
I think that's great advice, because my experience in law school is that there are no professors that will pass you for showing up. So it's good
That's right.
preparation, right? In undergrad, to take the hard
Yep.
classes, because it's only going to get more difficult, right? If you want
Right.
to go into the legal field, and for law school, I'm sure that was true at Temple, which is, obviously an excellent school. So thank you. I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to Juliana, who is going to ask the next question. Juliana, take it away.
Thank you so much. And just listening from what you were saying, Judge, I definitely relate where you were saying about the minority group and that stigma about doing what's right, especially where I'm coming from, parents of immigrants who focus mostly on giving the best to their children. And that's really what my personal statement is about, and why I want to become a lawyer is to give a voice to those who aren't spoken for and who are mistreated by the justice system. So thank you so much for that. I really related to that. My question for you would be, John Jay, as you know, is a school with many students aspiring to be lawyers, and students who are not sure what path they want to take in life. And I'm just curious to know, how did you know that law was the right path for you? What was the moment where it's stuck in your head, like, this is what I'm going to be confident in, this is what I want to do?
I think I'm a little bit of an outlier when it comes to that, because I always, well, let me take a step back. I didn't always want to be a lawyer, right? I first wanted to be a veterinarian. And then someone told me you have to operate on animals. So that wasn't going to work. So that, no good, right? Then the next thing, I wanted to be a pilot. I was too heavy, too short to be a pilot. Okay. And then it became lawyer. And then it went on forever. And just to give you an example, when I was appointed to the Appellate division, Brooklyn Tech put a post up, I forget if it was Facebook or Instagram, congratulating me. And I remember one of my classmates, he wrote, I remember him telling me he was going to be a judge in the hallways of Brooklyn Tech, right? It was something that I always, I don't know what it was about being a judge, enamored with it or whatever it was. I just thought it was one of the ways that I could really make a difference in my community, right? Having been raised in Brooklyn, Bushwick, I've seen injustices firsthand. I've seen interactions with the community and the police go left, right? I've seen, I've been stopped by the police on more occasions than I would like to count, right? So those are experiences that I've lived. They inform my thought process. They inform my reality, right? And it's those experiences that made me want to go into the area of law, right? Where I thought it was a place that I could give back. Like, when I first said that it's almost taboo to say that you're a former prosecutor nowadays. I say it with pride because I think I was a good one. I think that I was different. To me, it wasn't about my conviction rate. That wasn't important. It was about justice, right? Do we have a victim? How can I help this victim? Do we have a defendant? Do we have a person that's accused of this crime? Did this person do it? Do I believe in my soul of souls that the person did it? Do I have the evidence to prove that? And then it's not just about, if you convict someone, it shouldn't be about putting them in a box and throwing the key away forever, right? Don't get me wrong. Some cases call for that. But for the most part, people can be rehabilitated, right? And so that was something else that I try to engage in. Hands are tied, hands are limited when you're an assistant district attorney because you have a job, right? And even when you come to the court, right? As a judge, I don't have the resources I wish I had to be able to deal with some of the root causes that cause people to be involved in the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, no matter how much we try, the court system is just not set up to deal with society's ills. The way that it is now, it is more punitive than anything else. And I'm just saying that as a fact, as an observation. I'm not saying that is right? I think you glean where my position is from what I'm saying. But that's just what it is. So I hope that's answered your question in some point.
Yes, it has. Thank you so much. My next question would be, you have mentioned that you served as an assistant district attorney, the administrative law judge, justice of the New York Supreme Court, and now a judge in the First Department of New York State Appellate Division. So we are wondering how your role prepared you for your current position, and what are some of the most memorable experiences?
Each one of well, I first have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed and loved every single job I've had since law school. And I think I'm the rare exception that can say that, right? And what I tell my students is that when you are trying to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life, you have to do at least my advice is you have to do something that you're passionate about, something that you love. Because when you do that, when you wake up in the morning, it's not a job. You're not saying, oh, damn, I got to go back to this place and for 6 hours and you're looking at your watch. No, when you're doing what you love, it's not a job. It's a career. It's a profession, right? So in terms of how did it prepare me? Well, I think in terms of preparing me for the appellate division, since we preside over all areas of law, right? I have an expertise and most of my experience is in criminal, right? But in the appellate division, criminal is like maybe 10 or 15% of what we do, then everything else, right? Commercial. So because I've had such varied experience, I've had to learn different bodies of law. I've had to learn how to adapt to different people and different systems. I think those transitions, which if you look at my resume, happened every 4 to 6 years, prepared me for the fast pace now in the appellate division of having to switch from commercial cases to criminal cases to matrimonial cases, to whatever else. So I think it's made me flexible. It's made me adaptable. It's made me someone that is not afraid to tackle a new area. Most people are afraid of change. Most people like to be in their comfort zone and do what they know. And don't get me wrong, when the criminal cases come, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna have, this I'm really gonna understand. And others, I have to sort of put in the work. I have to put in the work and look, anybody, any lawyer, any judge that tells you that they know everything about any area of law, or God forbid that they tell you that they know everything about all areas of law, is confused, lying, or mistaken, right? That's just not the case. It's too vast for one human being. So as an appellate court judge, if an issue comes up that I haven't encountered as often as I would like to have encountered, I research it, right? That's what we do as lawyers. That's what we do as judges. You research it, you educate yourself on it, and then you make an informed decision, hopefully.
Thank you. My next question would be, you have mentioned that you served as the chairperson for Latino Judges Association Board Subcommittee for Community Service. How has embarking on those community service ventures and interacting directly with the communities you served affected your experience as the judge?
It's important to stay connected to the community, right? And staying connected with the community, number one, it keeps you current on what's happening, right? Number two, I'm a big believer you can't forget where you came from, right? You just can't, and you have to give back. So when I was chair of the community service at the Latino Judges Association, coming across community service for judges is not as easy as one may think, right? Because we have some limitations in what we could do, and we have to be worried about impressions and things of that nature. So I'll never forget, one of the first things we did was I organized us to volunteer at a soup kitchen in Manhattan. So here you have a bunch of judges from all over the place, from the Appellate division down, throughout the entire system. And here we are at this soup kitchen, and our task was cleanup, right? And I will tell you that it was some of the hardest work that we have done collectively, but it was rewarding. It was rewarding to see the community there. It was rewarding to interact with them. It was rewarding to hear their experiences. And the last thing we did was tell them that we were judges, right? We didn't want to spook anyone away. Second, we didn't want it to be about us. We wanted it to be about them, about what we could learn from them and how we can help them. And giving back to the community is something that's important. The legal profession sort of requires it with pro bono work, to the extent that that's giving back to the community. But it's something that you should endeavor to do. Because like I said, you can't forget where you came from. And at the end of the day, we're all in this business to serve the community, right? I have been a public servant since the day I left John Jay. Well, since the day I graduated law school, I should say. I've been a public servant, and I'm proud of that.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I will definitely keep your words in mind moving forward, not only as a John Jay student, but as a future lawyer, hopefully. But I will definitely keep everything in mind, and I'm going to turn it back to Erica.
Thank you. You're muted.
It continues. I still haven't gotten used to Zoom, right?
It's happened to me at least 4 times today. So don't worry.
I know. It's amazing. So thank you for alerting me to that. So Juliana, feel free to hop on if there are other questions that come to mind. I'm going to get into a few questions about advice you have for students. I think you've already given so much great advice, but if you have any other recommendations, including the kinds of classes that you think students should be thinking about taking, if they're thinking about going into the legal profession, or they want to do justice-oriented, social justice-oriented, or public service work, if there are classes that stand out for you in terms of perhaps the folks that clerk for you, or classes that prepared you well, that you think these students should be thinking about, that would be great.
Well, so in terms of the classes, I think that the most if you're gonna go into the area of law, you're gonna take the requirements, right? But out of it is a required course, but I think to the extent that you could take extra courses in constitutional law, that's something that is that's very important. Depending on your perspective, the Constitution is under attack, right? And knowing the ins and outs of constitutional law is something that can help. You also have to take courses that are not only squarely focused on the law and what the law is, but on its application, right? And the effects that it has in the communities when it is applied and how it is applied, right? But the one piece of advice that I want to give you that I think I hope it resonates is that you have to remember que sí se puede, right? Which is yes, we can. And the reason that I say that is because there is this phenomenon that I think all Latinos, Latinas, minorities have at some point in their life been afflicted with, and that is the imposter syndrome, right? And so what is the imposter syndrome? The imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and having this feeling that you do not belong, right? That you're a fraud. It is a very real and specific form of self-doubt, right? And I will tell you that this is real and it happens. And the reason that it happens, particularly when you are the first of something, you start thinking to yourself, I'm the only Puerto Rican male here. Do I belong here, right? How did I get here? I'm not smart enough. And is that true? Absolutely not. But that's the way we've been programmed by society, right? When you don't see other Latinos and Latinas, people that look like you, people that share your experiences, when you don't see them in these positions, you start to wonder, well, that must be because they're not good enough, right? And that's not it. So what you have to do is when those thoughts come to your mind, and they will, you have to take a step, you have to sit back, take a deep breath, and just think of all the struggles, of everything that you have done to get to where you're at, right? And remember that you achieved your goal through your own hard work, your own character, and your own work ethic. Don't let anyone take that away from you. And God makes no mistakes, right? So if you are a justice in the appellate division, that is exactly where you belong. If you are a senior at John Jay College looking to get into law school, that is exactly where you belong. So just have faith in yourself. Those thoughts will come into your mind. Yes, they've come into mind. They've come into, some of the greatest people that I know, some of the most successful people that I know. But just realize that self-doubt is not you. That's society making you doubt yourself. That is the old way of things, making you doubt yourself. So we have to change that. So my advice is when that little voice starts talking, take a step back, breathe, and think.
Thank you, Judge. That is great advice. And I do think, college is a great opportunity to build your confidence and build your experiences. So some of it is about taking the right classes and getting yourself set up for a career. But I think it is an important moment, right, for self-reflection and to think about, I belong here and I belong in all the spaces that I want to be in, even if I don't see myself in them right now, right?
That's right.
So I really appreciate, your thoughts on how to use this time, that young people have when they're in college, not just about studying, but about building up their confidence. And that's something I think we really do want to support here at John Jay. So thank you for your words on that. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we've got a couple of questions coming in. But I did want to, because you're talking about representation, and I think that's so vitally important. I wanted to ask you some questions about, I think some of the work that you've been doing with the Latino Judges Association and others in order to advocate for better representation. We know that the bench is not as diverse as our communities are. I was just looking at some statistics from 2020, and I assume things haven't changed that much in the last few years, but the percentage of judges on the bench that are Latino or Latina is not reflective of how many of us there are in the city or the state. And it doesn't seem like that's changed as much as we would like over the last several decades. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what do we do about that, right? And I think, part of what we try to do is support students here at John Jay and going on the journey you've gone on, but I'm sure you've given this some thought. So would love to hear your ideas and reflections on how we can change that fact and we can make sure that the bench actually does represent our communities.
Well, I think just in terms of statistics, I did some research into statistics, and I called my mentor and friend, Sally Manson at Daniels. She is a fierce advocate of inclusion, of diversity and equality. And she put together some stats, and let's see. So New York State has about 331 million residents. New York City has about 8.4 million. In New York State, Blacks represent about 12.4% and Hispanics 18%. In New York City, Blacks represent 23.8% and Hispanics 28.9%. Yet the judiciary, and these numbers are as of November 2019,
okay.
Out of 1,275 members of the judiciary, those are judges, 105 or 8% were Latino, right? And although 2 years have passed, I don't think that number has changed considerably. I think the only additions I could think of is myself and someone else to the appellate division, but we were both judges at the time, so we were included in that number. So in terms of increasing our numbers, the first step is we have to be there, right? You have to be in a position where you could be a lawyer, where you could be a judge, where you could be a court attorney. I will tell you that I've been blessed with 2 wonderful court attorneys that I would not trade for anyone in the world, right? I really mean that. But in my court attorney search, I was saddened to see that I interviewed about 20 people. I must have gotten about 100 applications. And there was one Latina, one. one in that whole group. And her application came after I closed it, right? And I remember speaking to my then court attorney, and I asked, did we get anything from any, Latinos or Latinas? And she's like, Judge, we didn't get a single one. I was like, that's amazing. And I told, can you just check, just check again, check the portal. So she checked the portal, and after the deadline, one Latina had submitted a resume, and we called her for an interview, and she never responded. That's another story, right? But the fact is that we have to be there, and we have to be present. And the way that happens is through functions like this, through information, right? Through spreading the word, through sort of encouraging our people that you have, do what you have to do, put the work in, right? Put the work in, and the rewards will come. But you have to be present. What we don't want to happen is someone to be able to say, well, I've never hired a minority because they don't apply, right? Just today, I can't go into too much detail, so I'm really not supposed to speak about it, but there was something that I was involved in where we were looking at appointments and reappointments. And the question came up, like, why aren't there any Blacks or Latinos seeking a reappointment or appointment? Well, the reappointment we know because they're not Black or Latino to start with, right? But the new appointments, why? And the response from the person was, we didn't get any resumes from Blacks or Latinos. So at least people that identify what we know are Black and or Latino, right? So we don't want that to be the excuse. We don't want that to be the reason. The other thing that happens is, and I tell this to my students when I try to explain why I'm so tough on them, is you're not going to get anything, right? No one's going to give you anything for free. In fact, if anything, they're going to try to take things away from you. They're going to try to come up with reasons and obstacles as to why you cannot or should not go to law school. I have to say that I worried about mentioning this, but you know what? I'm going to say it anyway. And this is no slight on anyone. But when I was in John Jay, I had a guidance counselor who had never met me before. I asked for a meeting once one of my colleagues told me about this test called the LSAT, right? I was like, what is that? And I was in my junior year already. Like, what is that, right? I'm late to the game, right? You're late to the game. So when he told me, so I set up a meeting. At the time, I had like a 3.5 in John Jay. I graduated John Jay with honors. And this woman, I don't know how, I can't tell you how much she knew about me. All I could tell you is I didn't know anything about her. It was the first time I met her, first time she met me. I walk into her office, I tell her I want to go to law school. And she tells me basically that I'm not law school material, right? That why am I thinking about law school? So you're going to have those people, right? You're going to have, and in spite of her, I knew she wasn't the one that was going to help me, right? So I had to seek out other organizations, other people, I went back to my friend who happened to be an African-American male. Dude, what do I have to do? And he sort of helped me out, right? But the point is, you're going to have those obstacles. You're going to have those obstacles in places that you least expected. I love John Jay. She didn't belong in John Jay. And she's lucky that I don't remember her name.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. That just not everything's going to be perfect, right?
Exactly. And again, Snow State at John Jay, I love John Jay prepared. I can't rave about how well prepared I was for law school. One of my biggest pluses that I credit John Jay with is knowing how to write, right? Writing, your writing skills, particularly if you want to do anything in law enforcement, even if you want to be a police officer, right? Some people say, why do I need to know how to write if I'm going to be a police officer? Police officers get massacred on the stand on things that they've written just because they were poorly written or not written in the way they wanted. It's just, I've seen good officers get killed because of their writing. So writing is an important skill for all, at all levels of law enforcement, all levels of the legal field. So that's something that John Jay prepared me for very well.
Yeah, I agree. Writing is such an important form of communication. And again, this is this prime opportunity when you're in college to really work on it and work on different kinds of writing skills. And so if you can do that now, especially as you go into the legal field where they then teach you a very particular kind
That's
of,
right?
It really does. It does help a lot. And I'm glad you brought up the LSAT actually, because one of our students, Sarah, I think had a question about the LSAT specifically. So this is a perfect segue. So Sarah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This question is actually from the Q&A portal. So students are wondering what you mentioned, like specifically the LSAT. How did you you mentioned a bit, but how in more detail, how did you prepare for the exam? How did you prepare for the application process yourself? I know you mentioned you reached out to organizations, but if there's any more like specifics as to what you did and what that process looked like for you, if you could please share.
Well, I have to thank my friend that put me onto the LSAT, right? Because by that time I was severely behind the 8 ball. But I'm going to tell you what he did, because what he did was brilliant, right? And then I may be a little dated. Remember, I graduated back in 1995, right? At the time where we used to carry around with the LSAT books, there were these things called LSAT books, prep books, right? They were huge books. So what this man did was he knew about the LSAT clearly, and he knew about it going into John Jay. So since day one in John Jay, this kid walked around with that book. And what he did was, he told me, Julio, all I do is every day for 5 or 10 minutes, I answer 2 or 3 questions. That's it. That's all he did for 4 years. 2-3 minutes a day for 4 years, it's a lot of time cumulatively, right? But on the average day, 2 to 3 minutes is nothing. You take 2 to 3 minutes to wash your hands, to wash the teeth, whatever. That's nothing. So my advice would be to do that, because the LSAT, they could tell you whatever they want to tell you. The LSAT, in order for you to do well in the LSAT, and I don't know how much they've changed it, but in order to do well, you have to know how to answer their questions, right? You could be brilliant and still be a disaster on the LSAT. The LSAT back in 1995 was supposed to be a predictor of how well you're going to do in your first year of law school, right? Well, let me tell you, I didn't do well in my LSAT. I did a little bit above average, and I had a 3.89 my first semester in law school. So that blew that out the water, right? But nonetheless, it's still a metric that's used. In fact, I read an article the other day that I think they're trying to move away from it. I think law schools are trying to like not rely on the LSAT anymore, and that'll be a welcomed thing in my view, because in my view, it's just a standardized test that really doesn't gauge anything, right? And I'm living proof of it, because according to the LSAT score that I got, I should have barely passed my first year. And in fact, I was, I think, top 3% in my class my first year. So to prepare for it, get the book or the electronic equivalent of it, do a couple of questions a day. And that depends how much time you have, right? If you have 4 years, then that's a lot of time. If you have a year and a half like I did, then you have to crunch a little harder. In terms of for help, you can look at organizations like the Puerto Rican Bar Association, the Dominican Bar Association, right? Those associations, they first of all, they offer scholarships to students, right, that merit them. They have their own qualifications for that. And these are already people that look like you, that have been through your experiences, that have achieved the title of attorney, counselor at law, right? And these are people that they're in this organization because they're looking to give back, they're looking to mentor. And I believe that the Latino Judges Association, ever since I got on the appellate division, I haven't done much work with them because I've been extraordinarily busy, but I believe they have some kind of a mentorship program, right? So you have to seek out those mentorship programs and just take advantage of them. There are a lot of Latinos and minorities in general that are willing to give back and help others continue, on their path.
Thank you so much. It's just so great to hear about your personal experiences, because I know everyone can definitely learn from everything you've said so far, especially for those that are nervous about the LSAT, applying to law school, going through that tumultuous process. So thank you so much.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. I wish I'd had that advice to study just a little bit every day. I crammed it in at the end and
Me
then
too.
stressed.
And it was so painful.
It's so painful. It really is. But in the end, here you are. So I'm glad you went through the journey and through the pain. But I think that advice around doing a little bit every day will make it a lot less painful for students. So wonderful advice there. We have one last question in the Q&A that I think really speaks to your experience and how our students are connecting with it, which is this question comes from Erica Roscoe. Do you think that growing up in the city influences your decisions on rehabilitative programs, such as juvenile alternatives to incarceration programs? And I love this question because you were talking about kind of the limited options you have to deal particularly with criminal justice challenges. So would love to hear your thoughts on this question.
I have to say that my experiences where I grew up and everything has really informed that. Look, when growing up in Bushwick, I that saying, but for the grace of God, there go I. It's really true, right? And it's the grace of God and the fear of my mother, right? My mother never touched us, but she didn't have to, because her speech, we just believed what she said, and she meant what she said, and she just kept us on the straight and narrow, right? But I saw firsthand people that were involved in all sorts of things, right? Drug trade, car theft, things of that nature. And the perspective that I have is that I knew some of those people on a personal level, right? Meaning these are people that I played football with, these are people I played baseball with, these are people from the community. They for a good majority of them, they were ordinary people just like you and I, right? They wanted the same things we wanted. The difference was that either by choice or circumstance or both, they took a different path, right? All that to say is that when someone is convicted of a crime, they immediately have this huge stigma placed on them, right? And that's unfortunate, right? Because what we have to all realize, and I tell my students, is that a person that's convicted of a crime, unless they're sentenced to life or death, they're going to be released and they're going to have to reintegrate back into society, right? We want them to be contributing members of society. So what's the goal then? The goal then is to have someone that's locked up for X number of years comes out and doesn't know what to do with him or herself, how to reintegrate, how to support him and herself. Is that what we want? Do we want to rip families apart? Do we want to throw fathers and mothers in jail? Unless it's absolutely necessary. Is that what we want? I don't think that's necessarily the right answer. So I think in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of providing those services, if you keep kids out of trouble, if you give them things to do that they'll stay out of trouble, right? If you give them alternatives, they, for the most part, will stay out of trouble. And one of the most rewarding experiences that I had as a judge was, it was an attempted murder case that involved two 17-year-old African-American twins. And that was one of the rare instances where I think my intervention, along with that of the prosecutor, right? Because as a judge, if the prosecutor doesn't want to help and just wants to throw them in jail, your hands are tied most of the time, right? Unless they want to plead guilty to the charge, which brings about other disasters, right? Other consequences. Now they're convicted. But that one instance with those two boys is something that I will never forget, because we were successful in avoiding them getting a criminal conviction despite the seriousness of their charges. We were successful in putting them in the right path. And in fact, I saw one of those boys by happenstance at a function that I was at, and you could tell that he was afraid of me, right? And I was like, he looked familiar. And when someone told me his name, I remember who he was. And he's like, "Hi, Judge." And I was like, "How are you?" And he was just doing well. And I don't know why he was afraid of me. Maybe because I'm tough. I'm not really easy. I set high expectations. If you want something from me, you're gonna have to earn it. And this young man did. But it was wonderful for me to see that he was successful, that he's out of jail, that he's not back in the criminal justice system, right? That he was one of these people that, but for his circumstances, he would have probably made different choices. And I'm a big believer that people should get, when appropriate, people should get, second opportunities, be rehabilitated, be reintegrated back into society, and not shunned in one way.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, I think that's a great example of the way in which you can serve in so many different ways, in terms of thinking about not just your immediate role and kind of your role in determining guilt or innocence, but thinking about the long-term consequences, right? And how can you intervene in a way using whatever tools are available to you, even if they're imperfect, in a way that will produce a better outcome for that person and then all of the people in his life and his community.
Right.
And I know you rarely probably get to interact again with people that come before you in the courtroom, so it must be gratifying to kind of see those decisions play out in ways that are positive. So thank you so much for sharing that. We are very close on time. So I just wanted to thank you, Judge, so much for your time and your generosity in terms of sharing your experience. I want to thank our external affairs team, particularly Mindy Bockstein and Jennifer Lorenzo, and the whole team in external affairs for pulling this event together. to all of our attendees who had some fabulous questions, to our students, and Adelante for also pulling this together with us. We really appreciate it. And I just wanted to give you a last moment if there are any final words that you want to share with our students. You've given them so much valuable advice, practical advice, lofty advice, and we really do appreciate it. I know I wish I'd heard some of it when I was coming up and thinking about going to law school, but if there's any final words you want to share, the floor is yours, Judge.
All right, so just last week, to launch the start of Hispanic Heritage Month in the court system, my colleagues on the first All Latinx panel and I were invited to share our experiences. During that conversation, Justice Sally Manzanet Daniel, she's the first Latina ever appointed to the Appellate Division, who happens to be my dear friend and mentor. She said the following. She said, "You cannot have inclusion without diversity." Such a succinct yet powerful and true statement. Right? Diversity matters. Diversity promotes and instills trust in our courts and institutions. And it is this kind of trust in our institutions that is vital in promoting justice, supporting our democracy, and ensuring we live in a society under the rule of law. Altogether, diversity helps ensure that our institutions have the moral authority to dispense justice in our society. Beyond trust, diversity helps improve the quality of justice. It aids judicial decision-making. It brings a variety of necessary perspectives to the decision-making process, and it brings in experiences that have long been lacking in this process. It has been an honor to participate in such a wonderful and important discussion. I hope to see you soon, hopefully as part of the legal community. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. It's been such an honor and a pleasure. And thank you to all of our attendees. I hope everyone has a great evening and hope to see you at the next event.
Take care, everyone.